So our second speaker, our second question, Todd Saunders. Todd is General Manager Australia for Sanitarium Health and Wellbeing Company, FMCG manufacturing and distribution business known for such brands as Weet-Bix, Up and Go and So Good. Sanitarium has revenue of around 400 million and Todd's duties encompass all of the operations in the Australian food business. He's been in the role since January 2011. Prior to this, he held the role of Strategic Planning and Development Manager from September 2009 to December 2010. Again, please join me in welcoming Todd to the stage, please.
Good morning. Well, I'm Todd Saunders and I'm a Weet-Bix kid. My granddad was a Weet-Bix kid. He was a Weet-Bix tray man. My dad's a Weet-Bix kid. He was a Weet-Bix plant engineer. And of course, I'm a Weet-Bix kid too. We work at a place called Sanitarium, or as we call it internally, Sani or Sano. I'm just going to take you back just briefly to the past where times were a little bit simpler and show you an ad from the 1980s when I first started work at Sanitarium. Just see what you think of it.
Thank you, Australia. You've made us number one.
It's Australia's favourite breakfast. Weet-Bix is number one. From Aussie kids to grown-ups, it's loved by everyone. Aussie kids are Weet-Bix kids. Aussie kids are Weet-Bix kids. Aussie kids are Weet-Bix kids. Aussie kids are Weet-Bix kids.
Weet-Bix from Sanitarium. Low in fats, virtually no sugar, low in salt, packed with complex carbohydrates and dietary fibre. No wonder Weet-Bix is Australia's favourite breakfast.
Weet-Bix whole wheat goodness, grown in the Aussie sun. Australia's favourite breakfast. Weet-Bix is number one.
Ah, the days of the 60-second ad budget. So who here is a Weet-Bix kid? Put your hand up, please. Fantastic. Now, for everybody that didn't put their hand up, I'm going to presume you had Up and Go this morning. We're going to start this conversation as friends. So you know our products, I guess, but who is Sanitarium? Who is this company that manufactures Weet-Bix, Up and Go and So Good? We're all about health and hope for a better life. We started a long time ago in 1898 in Melbourne. However, within a year we'd relocated to New South Wales because demand was going through the roof. We manufactured goods such as granola and granose, which was a forerunner to Weet-Bix, and we delivered these goods to Sydney on a horse and a cart. By 1902, the horse and the cart were absolutely stuffed. So we built this boat. We took our product in the boat from the factory down the river to the railway station at Dora Creek, just near Newcastle. We've been exporting since 1905 to South Africa, India, China, Malaysia, Burma, and of course all out through the Pacific Islands. For over 100 years, 100 years ago, we had a franchise of restaurants. You could go in Sydney to a Sanitarium restaurant and order a vegetarian meal as far back as 1908. Obviously, a change in buying habits of those customers meant those cafes closed in the 1970s as we started to partner with supermarkets. Many of you will remember our health food stores that appeared on many high street malls. Those closed in the 1980s due to, the demise of high street stores and the rise of supermarkets. There's been a time of change for us over the last century. But throughout all of the last century, we've enjoyed one thing, and that's been the unrelenting growth of consumption of breakfast cereal. Notwithstanding that deregulation in the Australian economy and in the 1980s and 90s brought sweeping change for us. We closed factories in Hobart, in Victoria, in Adelaide, in Palmerston North in New Zealand. More recently, the Christchurch earthquake absolutely destroyed our Weet-Bix manufacturing capability in that city. We're proudly owned by the Seventh-day Adventist Church. This is a very important part of our heritage that we respect and recognise. The health message for us is absolutely key to what we do. You will recognise there some of the products that we make, and we consider ourselves to be experts in whole food and plant-based nutrition. We produce more volume of these products than anybody else in this country, than any other company both in Australia and New Zealand. And I have no doubt that you know our brands well, being Weet-Bix, Up and Go, and So Good. We have 6 manufacturing plants in Australia and New Zealand. We're not just based in one place. We have a head office just up on the central coast at Berkeley Vale, with our largest manufacturing plant co-located next to it. We employ 1,000 people in this country and over 300 people in New Zealand. I just want to give you a little bit of background to our business over the last 3 years as we started to look at culture. You know, our business from 2010 through to 2012 was growing, and it was growing really, really quickly. We had massive increase in demand for our Up and Go product, to the point where it actually knocked off Weet-Bix as the #1 cereal selling product in Australia. Imagine that, after 100 odd years of Weet-Bix being #1. We invested massively in new machinery in our beverage plant. We had no competitors at all for Up and Go. It was a wonderful time, a great set of numbers that came from that time, and that provided the backdrop for our decision to invest in culture. And the interesting thing for us was that we chose to invest in culture and leadership, not when things were going wrong, but when things were going really, really well. So what was the imperative to change culture if things were going really, really well? Reflect back one generation. Virtually all of our employees one generation ago in the 1980s, when you saw that ad, were Seventh-day Adventist. Today, probably 80% are not from a Seventh-day Adventist background, and that includes the team that works with me. The business has changed a lot over that time because we're operating in a global market. We've got an imperative to compete, and it means that more change was required. But if it's working well, why would you want to change? Why would we bother changing? There was a huge sense of entitlement, a huge sense of tradition. And of course the question was, well, why would we change? The Seventh-day Adventist artefacts certainly drove quite conventional independent behaviour throughout our first century. We had a cradle-to-grave philosophy, no different to other large manufacturers who build a factory and a town grows up around them. We had 2 factories like that, one at Cooranbong and one in Warburton. No different to the BHPs of the world or other large manufacturers. It was actually possible to be born in an Adventist hospital, attend an Adventist kindergarten, primary school and high school, go to an Adventist college and get an Adventist tertiary degree, join Sanitarium, work 40 or 50 years for us, and then receive a pension from the company defined benefit fund, retire to an Adventist retirement village, die in an Adventist hospice, be buried by an Adventist minister in an Adventist graveyard in an Adventist manufactured coffin. And you could do all of this whilst attending church every week with your co-workers. The Adventist community is a fantastic community, don't get me wrong, but it did bring a sameness of thinking, quite an insular thinking style, particularly in the smaller towns which we operated. Our turnover is less than 1%. Even today, it's 0.5% voluntary termination. So unless you retire, it takes me 200 years to change the entire workforce. So we've got to work with what we've got. New product development wasn't working for us. Throughout the early part of the century, we were starting to take bigger and bigger bets. And as a result, nothing was sticking. We had ageing management. We had no leadership program. There was a real absence of leadership development. So our first port of call was a leadership program. It was all about leadership. We had a survey in 2009 that cried out for it. We realised, and even our own staff realised, we'd created a group of managers and technical specialists, but we didn't have enough leaders. And so we started a leadership program, which was facilitated by Mandy Holloway of Courageous Leaders, who's here today. Thank you, Mandy. And very early on, we realised it wasn't about leadership, that culture came hand in hand with leadership. And the program was owned by senior management, and that's an important thing. There's some very interesting exclusions from the original program. It was a bit like operating a car without a clutch. There was that crunch as you put it into gear and crunched out. There's some really tough interactions of ego and expectations. In the original LSIs, some of the team had no blue. Not even that little dot that the printer cartridge puts on there to calibrate itself. So it could have all fallen apart on day one. It could have all fallen apart, but it didn't. Because the big test for us was what was going to happen if we didn't do it. So what is culture? How do we define and measure it? And you won't get a lot of statistics from me, I'm not that clever. But for us, it's about how do we do things around here. That's our definition. You know, whether it's your family or your club or your church or your workplace, everybody's got a culture. All the subgroups have a culture. Each of our factories has a culture. And a leadership program is a good start, and you get great tools and techniques to practice your leadership ability. But for us, the advantage of the investment in culture was the advent of a permanent tool, and that was the LSI. We don't get hung up on the LSI. We look at the causal factors and the outcomes as well. They're very important to us. And common language, though, however, has been the absolute key to our success. The ability to talk about blue, red and green behaviours have been very simple and very effective for us. Being constructive is the first aspiration in any conversation we now have. Even if we have to do what we call talking in draft, which is having a blunt and clunky, unedited conversation in a safe space to do that. As long as we aspire to blue, that's our objective. And it's critical to invest at all levels in the organisation, and we've rolled the leadership program now out to anybody that supervises people. This is not an HR program. If it's driven by the HR team, it will fail. It must be owned by senior management. And once we'd finished the program, our senior leadership team, we went mountain climbing in Mount Cook, or around Mount Cook in New Zealand, up at 8,000 feet. 11 guys in a hut by themselves, without communication, will really test the culture that you've got going in your team. But we came back from that experience absolutely united and focused. We started to agree things such as our common standards, how we were going to behave as a senior leadership team. What behaviour would we reflect to the people below us? And the obvious outtake from that was this: if you're not prepared to sign up to those behaviours or those standards, you have to leave the team. As I said, we drove the leadership program down to multiple levels because our commitment is to educate every leader in the organisation. Nobody can be left out. We have a team talk program, and that involves me and part of my team going around every organisation that is in our group and talking to people. Common language again was key. We had a fellow called Grant Brecht, who was the psychologist for the Sydney Swans and the Sydney Roosters, come and help us talk about what it meant to be on the bus, what the red and blue and green behaviours were, what they looked like, and we were really explicit about that. This is what the behaviour looks like. We weren't implicit about it. And it meant, of course, that I had to sign up to what we were preaching, as did my team. That resulted in some really tough decisions. We had to ask people the question, are you on the bus? We don't want idiots on the bus. And probably asking people to get off the bus was one of the most empowering things we did in the program, because we made it really, really clear at all levels in our company. Doesn't matter how technically proficient you are, doesn't matter how much you sell, how much profit you make. If you don't want to sign up to the common standards, if you want to be a bully, if you want to harass people, if you want to fight, you're not welcome in our business at all. The common standards are the key. So some people left the business, some at a very senior and long-serving level. Now, don't get me wrong here. This isn't a case where just because someone disagrees with Todd's strategy or speaks up and articulates a different point of view that I ask them to leave the business. What I'm talking about here is those people that have HR files 3 inches thick, that you've known for 10 or 15 years are a problem in your organisation, and the red and green behaviour, particularly the green behaviour, just has not dealt with that. And there I pay credit to my head of people and culture, Peter Hartnett, for frankly and fearlessly advising me as we work through those issues. We found out you can't change overnight. If you're expecting this to be some sort of evangelical experience, you will be sorely disappointed. It is just not like that. If it was, everybody would have done it already. It takes time, lots of time and lots of effort. And no one's bigger than the game. Not me, not my boss, the CEO. Everybody has to sign up. Just want to talk briefly now about the causal factors. These are graphs, so I'll probably lose myself here. The grey bars are our first test and the coloured bars are our second test. And it's confronting to realise that there's so many causal factors that affect culture. And it's really easy to get lost in what to focus on. So of course, we, like everybody else, made huge mistakes. We wrote culture plans that were 10 pages long. We addressed every causal factor in those plans. There was objectives, milestone, action points, timetables, and really it was clunky. It was hard. And it didn't take us long to realise when you're working with a team, the culture just has to be part of the strategic plan. It's not a plan by itself, it's part of your strategy. So we then zeroed in on something that was interesting to us, which was significant. We'd scored low on significance, which was strange to us because most people in our organisation are really attached to our mission and vision and see themselves as significant, or so we thought. We made a video that talked about significance in the company, about your part in the company. We showed it to all 1,000 people in our Team Talk program, and we called it out everywhere we went. And this was in addition to the other work being done on the leadership program. My point is this: if you focus on one or two things that really matter with the causal factors, everything else comes along with it, because the program is then paramount. Culture's not really difficult, but it does reward focus, discipline, and really hard work. So to the outcomes, because this work started to pay off for us. We were starting to have conversations at all levels in the business about how do I contribute to Sanitarium going forward. Positive, constructive conversations, as opposed to those old I'll stick my head in the sand conversations or I'll protect my fiefdom conversations. Role clarity was improving. Motivation was lifting. People were actually satisfied with their work. And conflict began to sort itself out. And interestingly, as we were heading into a period of trading difficulty, which I'll talk about in a minute, stress was reducing and job insecurity was improving. It appeared that we were beginning to position ourselves for the future, whatever that was going to bring. We produced an infographic and we kept communicating with our staff, and I can't overemphasise the importance of communication. You can see here that we wanted to be really clear with our staff about what we were doing to change the way we went about business at Sanitarium. And the outcomes. Once we brought the outcomes down from that huge bar chart to the things that mattered, we could start to help everybody make sense of what it was we were actually trying to achieve with this program. I spoke to all 1,000 people in the Team Talk program, and I wanted to emphasise people. We've all got brands, we all have manufacturing plant, we all have land and buildings. But what distinguishes us at Sanitarium is our people. If we invest in the people and we're really clear about the way we want to do business around here, we get business success. We're not here to play tiddlywinks. We're not here to sing Kumbaya. We are here to build an organisation that allows us to achieve our mission and vision and provide reward for our stakeholders. The employees are absolutely key to that. For them to be committed to Sanitarium as a workplace and what we're trying to achieve is paramount, because ultimately it's all about sustainability. I can cut costs for a while, I can invest in a motivational program for a while, but the sustainability that comes from investing in people creates this enormous wave of value. We kept communicating our next steps. It's never over. If you think you're finished, you start going backwards. Well, that's fascinating, but how did we put it to work? We found ourselves in a very tough trading situation, and I just want to talk to you about that. That was the background. So the business had been growing really strongly. Investment was at an all-time high, and we were investing in people for the future. So Christmas in 2012 came, and of course you've got all that nostalgia and well-wishing and backslapping, and boys, we've done a great job, and guys, what a fantastic job we've done here. Everybody was really excited about 2013. We felt that we were set up for success. We'd had conversations about the next wave of targets. We'd already set them. We're active and animated about what was going on in the business. We came back from holidays, not to the perfect storm, because life just does not like that, but to some really ugly trading conditions. I no sooner dusted the holiday sand off my shoes, and I was informed that 3 new competitors were coming to town in liquid breakfast. Not one, but 3. All big brands, all with exciting new products. Damn it. But that's okay. We've got no problem at all with competition. We've been expecting competitors for quite some time because it's been a really fast-growing category, but that's not what I asked Santa for, that's for sure. Added to that, there were some interesting changes in commodity prices, in particular protein. As we knew China was starting to ascend in demand for protein, and we're expecting a little bit of an uplift in prices, but what happened over the next few months really rattled our cage. Of course, the Australian dollar fell, and it fell quite quickly. The price of milk powder, auction after auction, began to rise and rise very quickly. It doubled in price over the lead up to the financial year 2014, placed me under all sorts of pressure. Nobody actually wanted to sell milk powder more than a month in advance because they were waiting for the next price rise. Wheat and soy isolate, which are key components of Weet-Bix and So Good, rose on an average of 20%. Now, added to this was the fact that breakfast cereal was starting, in terms of consumption, was starting to fall in very real terms, both around the world and in Australia. Now, for a company that's seen over a century of volume growth, this was a really sobering thought. Is it possible that breakfast cereal is falling out of favour on the breakfast table? Sacre bleu. And added to that was the fact that we had not had a price increase since 2008. That's 6 years. So what did we need to do? We needed to bring forward our new product development from 18 to 24 months, because that's what it normally took us, and we aspired to do it in 6. We needed to take risks and we needed to do it fast. It was the only way to actually fill the gap. There had to be new risk-taking in what had previously been a very green middle management environment. And boy, oh boy, were we about to find out if our walk matched our talk. So first cab off the rank for us was a product called Energised Weet-Bix. We took this from concept to store in about 6 months. Imagine this, we knew that the demand for protein worldwide was a big call out in food right now. We'd already taken that to market with Up and Go Energised. We had no idea what sort of protein would work in Weet-Bix. We had to find one. And the obvious sources were, of course, too expensive. So we had to find some others. We trialled some stuff. The biscuits were too fat. The biscuits were too thin. The buds ended out on the floor and not in the biscuit. Packets exploded, packets shrank. The usual story, on and on and on. Yet we'd committed to our customers that we were going to be there, and on we went. So to crack that problem, we needed a few things to happen. We had to have a management team that could identify and accept risk. You know, imagine this in an environment, as I said before, where the turnover rate is 0.5%. Sanitarium is a great place to work. The work-life balance is great. We make great products. It's a fantastic company. Do you want to be the one that makes a mistake and takes a risk? I'm not so sure. And that was our culture. We had to run processes in parallel. This could cost us an absolute bomb if it went wrong. We had to have an attitude of, yes, we are going to do this. We're not going to be deterred. The product was launched on time, was heralded even from the US as a protein innovation. It's doing well. Tick. Round 2 was partnering with our customers in ways that we hadn't thought to do before. Woolworths came to us and said, can you please develop a flavour of us for Up and Go? We said, sure, just for them. What flavour would you like? Caramel seems to be hot at the moment. Really? So off we went into development. Within weeks we had a flavour profile sorted out and taste and shelf tests underway. Now flavours can take up to a year to develop. You want the flavour to taste the same on day 1 as it does on day 365. If it starts to change, people are not happy. You've got to be able to predict the way that will change. We ran shelf life testing. We accelerated that testing in ways that we had not thought to do before, ordered the packaging at the same time, and went to market within a few months. For our period of promotion, it was actually the number 2 selling product in the Up and Go portfolio, and Woolworths and ourselves were absolutely delighted. No different was our partnership with Coles. Now, Coles had asked for a slab of Up and Go, much like the Coke slab that you will see at the end of an aisle on most weeks. Now, this was attractive to us because, as you know, for those of you that have kids, if you put a slab of Coke in the fridge, and no different to Up and Go, it gets consumed. Now, we'd never done this before. In fact, We'd only recently launched a 12-pack, and we were busy retrofitting that because handles were breaking and glue was coming undone and perforations were causing us an issue. We'd only ever made up and go in a 3-pack or a 6-pack, and here we were trying to whack it into a 24-pack. So we had a conversation, in draft, in blue. Do we do this? Or is there simply too much risk? Knowing that if we made the promise to Coles, we had to deliver, because Coles were going to line up catalogue, promotional support, and displays for the product. So again, we went to work, and the problems started coming. The board's too slippery. The glue's not adhering. There's fragility issues with weight. I ran several transport test trials where I pushed the product off the boardroom table onto the floor and it came apart. That's not how we normally do it, but we decided we had to improve it from there. What do we do? This is troubling us. We continue to commit, we continue to run the trials. We collectively bound ourselves together, and we'd actually passed the point of no return. And so a week before the main production run, my chief engineer comes to me and says, "Toddy, we can't make the product. There's just too many glue failures." Now at that point, you know your culture's about to be tested. No tempers lost, no hissy fits, just good, productive, blue conversations about the next steps. Bottom line, we fixed it. The promotion was huge. It was a $2 million promotion for us. One of my very best moments at Sanitarium. Now the final part of my story today is about this guy, gluten-free Weet-Bix. If there was ever a chance to reflect on what had changed in our company as a result of embracing culture change, it was gluten-free Weet-Bix. Now, we'd been looking at gluten-free cereals for quite some time. We'd noted the rise of the trend overseas, and we'd seen the various diets that were associated with gluten-free products. However, as you can imagine, introducing the concept of gluten-free to a company for 100 years where wheat has been the absolute gold standard was just a little bit of a challenge in the war for hearts and minds. Just a little bit, let alone the manufacturing issues. After all, Weet-Bix is one of Reader's Digest's most trusted brands. You don't muck around with Weet-Bix. So 6 months ago, in February 2014, on a sunny day, the senior team that was charged with bringing revenue forward actively began to sit down and discuss gluten-free again. The conversation moved really quickly from what we'd call loose cereals, such as cornflakes or rice-type products, to Weet-Bix. And we'd started to talk in earnest about what would it take to make a gluten-free Weet-Bix. So you can only imagine the project names. No Bix, Not Bix, Wannabe Bix. We do have some fun at times. So once again, we started to talk about how to make this happen, as opposed to why or why it couldn't happen. Constructive conversations will do that to you. We soon decided that the only way we could pull this off was to take an entire factory and convert it to gluten-free status. This meant we had to buy new cookers, new handling systems, and have brand new thinking. Remember, we're the wheat cooking experts. This is a whole new ballgame. So the first reports that came back from the investigating party was, "Todd, this is going to take 18 to 24 months to do." All other things being equal, and they never are because it always goes wrong. After all, we had no recipe, no equipment, and no factory. So we then had another conversation around risk and made a clear call on the factory, which is in Perth. We delinked the equipment that we were ordering from any pre-trials, so we took a risk on that because we know what we're doing with our cookers. And we authorised purchasing to go out and purchase sorghum, which is gluten-free, without even having a product to put it in. Marketing was straight on to pack design, and we took a call over a few weeks to set July 2014 as the first production date. Again, everybody took the risk together, and off we went to work. Now imagine disassembling and cleaning a factory that since the Second World War has made Weet-Bix for over 70, 80 years. We had volunteers from Auckland, Brisbane, Currumbong, Berkeley Vale, from all over our company. One of our engineers responded to the call and didn't even go home to kiss his wife goodbye. He got on the plane to Perth so he could be part of the project. I'm not sure that's good culture, but at least in the family sense, but it certainly worked for us. Because this was big for us. Everybody was excited. Everybody was also really, really nervous. We cleaned this factory with toothbrushes, with pressure cleaners, with vacuum cleaners. We had people underneath ovens in places that had not been accessed for many, many years, because the test for gluten-free is 0 parts per million. 0. None. Nada. And so to find one little speck anywhere is a problem. So to cut our long story short, we saw our culture in action over that period of time in ways that we actually didn't think was possible. Engineers, marketers, accountants, technical, audit, procurement, regulatory, sales and logistics all played their part in what it means to be a sanitarium guy or a sanitarium girl. The entire team received our Spirit of Sanitarium Award. We have a values-based Spirit of Sanitarium award system. We don't recognise profit or sales in the conventional sense. We recognise the people that have exhibited values in our organisation and brought them to the fore. The entire team won that award. We launched the product with a Facebook rumour in July, and we generated nearly 1 million impressions in 2 weeks. And the interests were absolutely passionate. The product's flown off the shelf at rates that are actually only associated with the flagship Weet-Bix product. Our customers were absolutely delighted and really surprised that we'd gone there. If only they could have seen under the hood. I just want to show you the ad for gluten-free Weet-Bix, which you should see on the telly soon.
Here's something new from Weet-Bix. It comes in gluten-free. It still tastes great with milk and honey. We think you'll all agree. So if you've missed it at your breakfast table or as a late-night snack, we'd just like to say to you from Weet-Bix, welcome back.
That's a shorter ad, just in case you didn't notice. So, if I sum up and I ask the question that everybody asks, so what? What have I learnt from this experience? What are the key outtakes for me and for my team? Firstly, it comes from the top. When your own CEO creates that imperative to change, that's huge. You've got a massive advantage. So if that's happening in your organisation, congratulations. You've got to be accountable, you've got to own it. And it's owned by line management. As I said before, HR are there, they're your frank and fearless advisor, they help you with the tools, they're your partner, but it's up to you as line management. You've got to keep it simple. Common language is key. I can't emphasise enough how important that is. You've got to get rid of complex culture plans. Focus on the 1 or 2 things that you can do to change. It's not rocket science. My head of HR says to me all the time, it's not rocket science, Todd, it's not rocket science. Don't form culture cults. Really, why would you want to do that? But some people do. It's wrong. You've got to keep calling it. Call it, call it, call it, but keep it blue. Mean what you say and say what you mean. You've got to be authentic in this journey. It's never perfect. It's sometimes clunky. You've got to be authentic. There can be no idiots. There will be some you ask to leave and you can't apologise for that. They actually made the decision, not you. They made the decision. And common standards are key. In our leadership team, if you lose your cool, if you throw a hissy fit in the room, you carry on, you'll be asked to leave. We don't accept that sort of behaviour in our group. It won't happen by itself. It will slip unless you give it attention. Keep going. Discipline, commitment are absolutely key. You've got to practice it. Practice the theory and be overt about practicing the theory. And we do this by having a number of cross-functional teams that call out culture when we work on projects. You've got to force and embrace that cross-functional interaction. And lastly, you've got to have fun. I like going to work at Sani. It's a great place to work. I smile most of the day. Most of my team smile too, at least they look like they are. It's a good place when you walk to work and you're happy to be there and you want to get into it. Having fun is really important. So for me, at the end, the so what question, I knew I was part of a high-performing team. I knew we had the right culture when in the middle of 2014, with no hope of achieving our midterm strategic target, I found myself surrounded by a team which at all levels hates losing. Even though the thought of that year's bonus or incentive was gone, they were relentlessly focused on bringing new revenue to market and adding to that total right into the last month, right into the last week, and in fact right into the last day of the financial year. There was none of that old attitude of, we can't make it, let's just wait until next year. None of that, that was gone. There was a new group of leaders emerging, intent on ensuring that we, who are the custodians of our business, were going to do everything we could to excel, despite the tough trading conditions we found ourselves in. Everywhere I looked, I began to see a leadership team that was determined to leave the Jersey in a better condition than they found it. No complaints, no excuses. Was that culture? I'll let you be the judge. Thanks.